House. So our last session, I have 6 sessions that we've had here at the Brain House, constructed last week, tear down next week, and move somewhere else. Just a few words to set up, and then we'll get to our really excellent panel here this morning. We've had a conversation all week, 5 different sessions leading up to this one, from a wide variety of sectors, from funders to policymakers to industry to NGOs to foundations, about the importance of the brain to our health, to the capital that companies need in order to generate profits longer term, and to bring about a change in the economy. We live in a mega trend of aging demographics, which means a number of things. That the chronic diseases of aging, led in terms of numbers, in terms of DALYs by brain disorders, are growing rapidly. And the cost to governments, the cost to families, and the cost to each of us is rising rather rapidly, $5 trillion now per McKinsey, and rising, tripling that in the next 25 years. That's one effect of the aging demographic. The next effect is that we have fewer workers for growing populations. Fewer people of working age are able to contribute the taxes, the economic growth that has basically rooted us in a world which is so materially well off compared to 100 years ago in most parts of the world. That's quite extraordinary. But if we have fewer workers for larger populations, absent increasing worker productivity and participation in the economy, we're not going to be in the same place at the end of this century as we were at the beginning. We're going to go the other way. Particularly important to this brain economy, moving from a brain negative world, we have fewer brains working, more brains sick, to a positive world in which the brain is a contributor to economic growth, a contributor to our own health, a contributor to capital in the economy, is a transformation of comparable scope and scale to climate change or to what we're seeing with AI. But no one's really talked about it this way. From a patient point of view, my family has lost 3 generations to Alzheimer's. I think of the problem as an Alzheimer's problem. Someone with a stroke thinks of this as a heart problem. Somebody with cancer thinks of it as a cancer problem. What we need to do is define the underlying systems change that needs to occur across all of these brain disorders, and at the same time, how is it we build brain resilience to increase the productivity of a smaller workforce so that our material well-being is great. And as we do that, we have to include the Global South, because so much of our global economic growth is going to be dependent on the success of the Global South as the populations in the Global North shrink. We can bring technology to this equation, but we have to bring technology to this equation in a way that is actually usable in the Global South. And the Global South, because it has health systems that is not as complicated as the Global North, has the ability to innovate in terms of lower cost, more accessible interventions that can deal with these issues, and as it's going to be important to our futures in the Global North, that we have a workforce from the Global South that drives their economy and contributes to ours. So this is a global issue. It is not a national issue. It's not a Global North issue or a Global South issue. We're all in this together. So the real challenge that this panel is going to try to address is, okay, I get it. We got to change our nutrition. We've got to change our educational system. We've got to do a better job at maternal health, so the first 3 years of life when the brain is formed, that those kids have got the brain that they need for their life. We have to change health systems. We have to change. So how do we bring about change? Because everyone will say, okay, we get the 6 things that has to happen, or 5 things, or 4 things. But how do you basically stop the pandemic of brain disorders with the same energy and commitment that we had to preventing COVID? This is an epidemic caused by demography. That's an epidemic caused by an infection. but the consequences in terms of the globe are comparable. How is it that we develop the brains of our young people and our old people to increase productivity and increase productivity now in the next few years, but as well for the next 20 or 30 years? And how do we convene around these things in a way that brings people aligned in some fashion without trying to micromanage the globe? We're not going to create a super government. We're not going to create one place that's going to manage this process. But we can potentially, partnering, bring together a series of conveners, World Economic Forum being one, DAC another. We'll work together on a series of convenings in 2025 to actually bring these different sectors together in different contexts to try and, by DAC 2026, have something that says this is the path and the roadmap to what it has to change. These are the indicators of how to measure that change, and these are the convening processes to continue that change management. I'm going to call it management. That's too top-down a word. This change process over the course of many, many years. So that's the light load we put on this panel, is how do we bring about the change that we all think we need without defining it as an Alzheimer's problem, a cancer problem, a heart problem, some other health problem, not just a food problem, not just a maternal health problem. How is it that we change all these systems in an aligned fashion and can communicate it broadly and indeed, hopefully in a compelling way to populations around the world, as well as to governments around the world, as well as to businesses around the world. So we have a heck of a panel here. I really want to mention Andy Moose. Andy Moose heads the health and is at the health program at the World Economic Forum. He has just convened something down at Kerr Park inside Congress on precisely this subject, so he can report a bit on that. But he is going to also announce a series of convening processes that the WEF is going to work on with us, with McKinsey, and others to begin to define the systems change that we need in the indicators that we have to develop. Lucy Pérez is going to define with McKinsey. She's the brains of the bunch, and define exactly how this is going to happen, Lucy. Cara Altimus at the Milken Institute, and Christa Studzinski of the Ontario Brain Institute, which, as you will see, has a central place in what we're going to try to do at the G7 this year. But we have a series of things that we're planning out. We'll expose them to you all, but very much want all of your input. I just want to call out the European Brain Council, who is sitting over there. They run Europe. Oh, I'm Claudio Bassetti. Claudio Bassetti from European Brain Council, although I identify the staff because that's who I work with, Claudio. He's the boss. But Canada is going to be a key player this year, as well as Europe, as they're developing their thinking about a brain health plan. The United States doesn't have a brain health plan in name. We have a national Alzheimer's plan, which now looks at all of the life course issues associated with brain resilience and brain health. So in effect, we have a functional brain health plan in the United States as well. But trying to raise this up at the G7, the G20, and at other venues during the course of 2025, largely to think through what the systems change strategy ought to be and the indicators is important. So let me start. Who wants to speak first? Why don't you, Lucy, you speak first, as you're the third partner in this effort.
I'm very happy to, and hello, everyone. I'm Lucy Pérez, senior partner with McKinsey and co-leader of the McKinsey Health Institute. We're a mission-driven entity within McKinsey focused on adding years to life and life to years. And that's why we're here and so interested in this conversation, because brain health is absolutely essential when you think about how do you add years to life and life to years. For too long, we've been accepting and embracing, rightfully so, that improvements in human health is what has most contributed to economic output and productivity. but we've frankly missed the boat when it comes to brain health, right? I think for me, I look at this, and the reason we're all here together is because this is the key enabler of a next step change, right? As we think about economic output, productivity, and the well-being of so many. And so whenever you tackle something like this, collaboration is of the essence, right? And that's why we're so proud to partner with the Forum, with Us Against Alzheimer's, with the Alzheimer's Davos Collaborative, and so many others, because there's a real case for change here, right? And that's what we've been very focused on, is the business case around this. Yes, we love numbers, but we love change even more. And part of having these numbers is about enabling that positive, enduring change, right? The big number, $26 trillion of economic opportunity from addressing brain health. And close to 12 trillion of that tied to what employers can do about promoting healthy workforces, right? But let's admit it, it can be quite challenging for employers because we've been looking at brain health in very siloed ways, right? In terms of what exactly do we mean by this? And one of the things, and I know I have a slide, and that people say McKinsey and the slides, too many slides, promise just one, but we're super proud of this work that's a result of the collaboration with Us Against Alzheimer's and the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative. That's looking at the intersection, because that's what we need. We need to think about how we bring these elements together, right? In the center, you see the three elements that when you're looking at it from an employer perspective is how we define brain health, right? It is basically, and let me make sure I get them in the right order, yes, mental health, right? It's neurological health, and it's workforce productivity. And for too long, we've been looking at these elements almost one by one. What are the solutions for each of them? And no wonder employers, lots of good intent, but it can get really overwhelming, right? And so what this work has done is like, let's look at over 80 risk and resilience factors and help prioritize, help bring focus to which are the ones that really impact even more. If you have to put disproportionate energy behind them, which are those? And those are the 9 that you see behind me, right? None of this will surprise you, right? But it is trying to give some more clarity to, out of those many that exist, where to focus on. Sleep, stress, right? Again, no surprises, but most importantly, how do you connect it to the business value drivers, right? What does it take to get to that 26 trillion that I was speaking about, right? And that's when you start thinking about, okay, this impacts how I attract talent, right? How I develop talent, the productivity of my talent. And so while this framework at this point is not yet quantified, that's the next piece of work that needs to be done to assign specific numbers, percentages to these boxes, I still believe it does a really, hopefully brings that clarity to the criticality of intersectionality in how we think about this space and how we have to connect the dots, right? So that we know the interventions that we're doing on this risk and resilience factors, how do they enable those positive outputs that we see on the other end of the slide? So only if we tie this all together will we unlock that productivity and well-being that we so desperately need. I mean, change is the name of the game, right? And building that adaptability and resilience that George was speaking about is only possible by focusing on brain skills and brain health. So let me pause there.
Terrific. Great setup. This will end up being the focus, I believe, of an event that we're doing in Houston, Texas in May at Shell Oil Company. This is the focus of work that we'll be bringing to the business community in Houston, Texas in May on a convening about how to turn this into action. But hearing back from business what they are doing today so that we can understand how it relates to what they're thinking and how they think about these issues. But this is terrific work from McKinsey, as all work from McKinsey is. It's redundant.
This is always a collaboration.
all the product of collaboration. So thank you very, very much, Lucy. Christa, you want to step up from Ontario Brain Institute?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who haven't heard of the Ontario Brain Institute, we are really all about advancing or taking brain health and getting it out into the community so that people who are living with and receiving care for their brain disorders can feel empowered and have better outcomes. And so for us, and for me personally, this whole experience at Davos, it feels like we've come full circle. I'm filled with optimism. I'm filled with hope about what's to come in the future. And so so they asked us to sort of prepare what are some of the key takeaways and themes that we heard in the conversation this week, and also what's to come. So I'll start with the themes that sort of came out from what the conversations I've been part of, and there's three things. There's the importance of philanthropy and different types of capital. There's the importance of partnership and just sort of tying some of the pieces together related to brain capital. So our organization was created based on philanthropy. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Rotman School of Business. It's one of the top schools in Canada for MBAers. Our founder was Mr. Joseph Rotman, and he saw the importance of brain health. And he was able to bring together some of his friends to collectively donate $100 million. And that was 13, 14 years ago. And we've been able to take that initial investment and turn it into over $600 million of neuroscience-related activity and brain health-related activity across Canada. So, Cara mentioned this in her panel, and I always talk about this, but it's a really, really important piece to spark some of this alternate thinking and doing things differently and really being innovative. So, second one, partnership. Partnership is so critical, and especially right now with all of some of these geopolitical changes that are going on. I think as a community, we really need to recommit and double down on partnership. The piece that I will say, because partnerships is in my title, they're hard, and it is really hard to do authentic and meaningful partnerships. And so we really need to stay committed to that mission. The other piece is that partnership doesn't always have to mean money. There's different ways to partner with groups, and happy to unpack that in a different setting. And so I'm going to pause for just a minute to really recognize George, Drew, and the Davos team for really convening this and really fostering that global partnership. Thank you. I know it's difficult, and I appreciate everything that you do.
That was very, very generous. But what happens here has turned out to be the panelists. During the course of this week, we have had such talent, such insights, and such brilliance from the people who participated in this. Now, a bit of our responsibility is to take that and to spew this to the world in a comprehensive way that gets people's energy focused here in a way, as you say, to create some of those relationships which turn into partnerships, which turn into change. And so that will be part of the job of Susan Oliver, who runs all of our communications. She's going to go change the world for us now.
She really is.
Speaking of SPARC, Cara, Altimus from Milken Institute really is the head of a program or initiative or project or whatever you define, called SPARC, where Milken basically brings together philanthropists with common interests to actually invest in change across a wide variety of domain areas. But so, Cara, takeaways from this week so far?
Thank you. And I'm going to steal all of the language you just used. That's what we do. SPARC, the Science Philanthropy Accelerator for Research and Collaboration, works with a variety of funders, not only philanthropists, but the nonprofit sector and scientific institutions as well, to think critically about their strategy and how to accelerate real change in the world for real people and patients. Thinking about what have I seen this year? Last year was the first time I was at Davos, and I will say brain, mental health, neurodegeneration, dementia, they were a whisper. And we would bump in, friends would, people in the few sessions and moments that there were, would bump into each other on the promenade. And I mean, it was hugs and like, you're here too. And when I reflect on this year, a major change is this physical space. And everyone that has come around the world to talk about brain health and all of the various facets of brain health. And I think it feels like a real change. And I also am feeling so much optimism. So within the Milken Institute, we do work with a lot of different funders, and we think quite a bit about the ways that different types of capital are able to catalyze different types of change. About, I think 6 years ago now, we doubled down on the idea that we needed to invest more of our time and energy in brain health and brain research. And so we've built out a couple different programs that bring more interest to individuals around brain health and brain research. That's led to more than $1 billion moving into research and investment in brain health, brain technologies, and neurological illnesses. And I think that's important because as I reflect on what does this movement look like, what are we trying to achieve? Together, we're trying to bring more people into the space with us. We cannot, as any one organization, as any one individual, be the change that's needed to bring the attention, the policies, the workplace practices, the research, the technology, all of that is going to be a lot of different kinds of organizations. And so, if we think of ourselves as the first cheerleaders and the first movers in the organizational space, then we're setting the example. And what we want to do is bring more friends along and to carry a collaborative spirit. And so, just to say, opening thoughts here, I hope that we're all able to do that more.
Can I just riff off of what Cara just
Please.
said?
You
Is that
may.
okay? Oh, I know, right? I know. I went for the mic because I talk with my hands. So one of my mentors a while back said to me, Christa, for a startup company, and she was involved with BlackBerry, she's like, sometimes it's not always about the product. There's two things that, in my experience, really matter. It's team and it's timing. And I really fundamentally believe that we have an incredible team here of global partners that are aligned in our mission and vision. And the timing is just incredible. And so this is our time to shine, and let's make sure that we come together and step up and make a real difference here.
Hallelujah, as they say.
Sorry, I'm being very,
In the
you know
church-
what?
in the church of the brain.
Can you honestly, so my boss teases me that I'm always like, oh, these are the problems, and I'm being very optimistic here. So please report back.
Claudio Bassetti from the European Brain Council, but I identify you as a huge leader in brain health inside Switzerland as well. So
Thank you.
please.
In fact, let me say hello to everybody. I'm Swiss, and I'm so proud and happy to have the Brain House. I have always had a dream to have a Brain House in Switzerland. Now it's here. Next time it will be bigger and larger and more important. So welcome everybody to Davos and Switzerland. We are very proud and happy to have you. And I'm really excited about what I'm experiencing here. We have been following the initiative of the WHO, mental health, the plans for mental health 10 years ago, then the plan for dementia, the IGAP for neurological health just a few years ago. And now it's time really to join forces. And you asked us, so the question, so what we should do next? I think when I think about what we should do out of what we're doing here, are three words that come to mind. One is we need partnership. We need to have intersectorial approaches to a big problem. We cannot change everything at once, as you said. I mean, it's too much. So we need partnership. And I'm very excited because I actually come from neuroscience. I've been doing neuroscience all my life. I've been taking care of brain disorder patients, so I know what does it mean. But all of you know, because it's so frequent, 1/3 of us have a brain disorder, and if we don't have it yet, we have a family member. So we all know the stigma, the sufferance, and the problems. But we start understanding that we can prevent them and we can promote brain health. So that's the moment where we should really join forces. So one is partnership. The second is that we need to understand, and that's why I like your picture. It's actually not so different from what we have produced in Europe and even in Switzerland. We need to have an holistic approach. We need to bridge mental and neurological health for brain health. At the end, to be able then to promote the new world, more fair, more creative, more productive, and more happy, we could say. So we need really to have an holistic approach. This is easy to be said, but how do you do it in everyday's life? And then at the end, and this is the challenge, we need to boil down to specific intervention, as you said, so we need to set up priorities. So I would say partnership, holistic, and priorities. Now, my last message of this first intervention is that we need to learn from each other. George, you mentioned, I launched with the European Academy of Neurology the European plan. Then I moved to Switzerland and I launched the Swiss. Now with the EBC, we are working on cross-fertilizing the experience of the different national plans. I was talking before the intervention. So we have plans in Switzerland. We have plans or ideas about plans in Africa. We have Singapore. We have the Emirates. We have in the United States incredible initiatives. In Texas, Rice University. So we need really to foster the crosstalk so that we learn from each other. And at the end, when we want to be operational locally, we need to boil down to the needs and gaps that are locally defined. So we can discuss at the global level, but then we have to go to the nations and the local reality. So these are my 3 words: partnership, holistic, and priorities.
I'm going to come, and my second question to this panel is, which systems have to change in order to affect change across the board from prevention to cure to brain capital? But I'm going to ask another question first. Is there an analog in other major change things that are going on in the world today? Let me just say climate change. We're on COP 30, right? So we have a major convening mechanism identifying the systems that have to change, the measures which we are using to try to assess whether change is occurring fast enough. Some of that's working, some of it's not working, but there is an analog. Is that a good analog, or do we have to think fresh about the system change mechanisms which we use with respect to brain health? I'm going to start with with Lucy.
It is interesting, George, because as you asked your first question, I was just thinking, are there any systems that don't have to change?
Totally.
So I actually think in that spirit of pulling on holistic from you, right? Like Claudio, I do think we need to be thinking about this, because I'm just running through lists in my head, and it's like, well, there's the financial systems, health systems, right? And so maybe you guys have more time to think of your answers and can figure out which is the one that doesn't have to change, right? And as you're thinking about what can we learn from climate, right? We've all, I think, referred to partnerships, right? And that is absolutely essential here. We have done a lot of work looking at public-private philanthropic partnerships, the 4P model, right? And I have to believe that is a key part of the answer here, right? And we know those work.
Can I add one more P? Patient.
Yes, I love it, the new 5P model. We're innovating as we do this, yeah. But that is absolutely true, right? And the reason, in driving the change, what do we know works, right? Like, what can we reflect on from these others, right? And we know it works. The first thing is we need to prove that it's material. I feel like we've done that, right? We've got the numbers for the business case. That part, for me, it's taken care of. The next thing that I think about is, like, is it suitable for action at scale? And again, I would say the answer is yes, because we have the proof points of what are the types of things that we can do, right? Like, we've learned from whether it's experiments, the work that has been happening by so many, over, the last couple of decades, and now this unified model that allows us to prioritize and really think about, okay, now how do we do it at scale, right? Which gets to the feasibility point. And maybe I'll connect it to what you were saying, Christa, right? Timing and team is everything. We have the stakeholders around the table. What ends up being one of the biggest, failure modes is a lack of alignments around the aspiration, right? And so to me, what I would think about, and you can argue that maybe, one of the challenges in looking at how we're addressing climate is that alignment. What can we learn around how do we build alignment on the aspiration, that collective aspiration that we have for where we want to be, our goal for this year, right? As you talked about where we want to bring this topic to, but if we take that 3-5-year view, how can we really be bold? And is there an opportunity to turn the tide? You made a reference to the numbers earlier. We're talking about $5 trillion of spend connected to brain health that's going to triple in 5 years. That's a really fast acceleration. What can we do to bend that curve and instead unlock the productivity that we all know is there? But
I'm gonna come back to you with another analog.
Okay.
What you're doing with women's investment, women's health. What impressed me about what you're doing there is you identified a whole set of systems that had to change, but you picked sort of the top 9, right? You didn't say, I'm going to take the whole bite now. Let's do this with 9 to see whether the systems change we want is occurring or not, and then we can scale to the other elements. So I liked that particular way that you brought your analogy. And women, of course, are vitally important to brain health.
absolutely,
Dementia.
51%.
Oh, no, 2/3 for dementia. So, just talk a little bit about what you're doing with women.
Yeah, and thank you for giving the opportunity to talk about this, right? People make the assumption that because women live longer than men, that women are healthier. And it is because for too long we've associated, right, health with lifespan. And this, frankly, like connects a lot to the conversation that we're having here, right? How do you truly think about health span? Because women actually end up spending 25% more time in bad health than men do. And it's not happening only at the end of life. The majority of it is actually happening during women's prime working years, ages 20 to 60. And because of that, it has huge economic implications because it's taking women out of the workforce, right? And so it is one of the most frequent questions that I get when I talk about this women's health is that people say, oh, but did you look at brain health? And it is, of course, it is foundational, right? For too long, we have made this assumption that physical health is all of health, right? And we really need to revisit the paradigm of thinking about health holistically, physical, mental, social, all of it. And so what we've learned from the work in women's health is that indeed, and it's the same framework I was using earlier, you start with some proof points, priorities, like you were saying, right? Like what are those most material that allow you to prove and move the needle on? And I mean, brain health is an absolute priority for us. Maria Paula, who's here, we've been working on a paper together around women's brain health. And then the interesting thing, it's not just brain health is connected to heart health. It's all systems, right? It goes back to why we need those unified models to move the needle.
So, Cara, let me come back to you. There were sort of two questions, and in fact, Lucy bridged the two. So the same question. Any analog of what's going on today in other fields or other change systems that we could use as a model, and any observation initially on what are the most important things to change in this space?
I think everyone sitting on the sofa had the same, everything needs to change. But if I think about the fundamental, what do we really need to change? It's our foundational understanding of what brain health is and how it impacts all that we do. And so when you compare that to climate change, it's, we think about the decades-long progress we've made in understanding that the climate is changing. And we have arguments around the periphery about the why and the how so and the so what, but we have moved to a place that it is pretty well understood and accepted that it is changing and it does matter. And so I think when we compare that to the brain, and we start to think about what needs to change, the first thing that needs to change is a foundational understanding by every human on the planet that the brain is core to who we are, how we engage with one another, and what we're capable of as a species. And so it's what do we change? The root. We change exactly how we engage with the problem. And then once you do that, it becomes, I think, much simpler to think about, well, then how do we change education, and how do we change health, and how do we change the integration across different brain illnesses and brain health holistically?
Terrific. Claudio, I'm going to jump.
Yeah,
I like to use AAA, three A's.
See, 3 A's.
We got the 5 P's.
Yeah.
You got the 3 A's.
Well, I'm just trying to follow George, you're such a model. So the 3 A's. One is awareness. I'm just saying so I do think that here we all know what we're talking about. If you go out, even doctors, public health experts, I'm not talking about the other stakeholders, the awareness about, one, the burden of brain disorders and what the brain does to our lives is not there. The way we interact with each other, the way we influence our lives depends on our brain. So awareness is one word. We need to explain, and this is the first A. The second one is the approach. So we need really to join forces and have one goal that we share, and then go in this way. So the approach is, and we used one sentence that I used before: one life, one brain, one approach. So we have one life, But we have so many brain disorders waiting for us. We have analyzed with Ingrid Beck here in the audience the burden of brain disorders in Switzerland. The publication is ready to be submitted. In fact, the burden on women is higher than in men, and it starts early. By the way, the approach should start early in life. We cannot think about promoting brain health just having longevity or immortality in our brains. So we need to start early. So the approach needs to be holistic and needs to be a whole life, and we need. And the third one is acquisition of knowledge. You know, we know a lot about the brain, but we have lots of determinants that are not known. So we think about the climate. So we need to be aware of the climate problem. We need to have an approach that is shared, and we need to have knowledge about climate change, and all three should work together. So the 3A would be my answer to your question.
Claudio, did you just come up with that 3 A's?
Yes, right now.
Brilliant, brilliant.
More on-stage collaboration.
Christa,
We'll use all the alphabet.
So
analogs, and where do we start?
before we do that, I want to see that report, and I want to talk to you more about that because we did one in for the Ontario Burden of Brain Health. And so anyways, we'll talk after. But so just kind of pulling and saying, I think what everyone else is already
I
saying.
think they call that a Davos moment.
What everyone else is saying, but saying it slightly differently. So if we can agree what that end state looks like, what are we trying to achieve? And then, we can use academic jargony words like theory of change and all these things, but I think it's important for each of the different players and partners to think about, okay, if this is the end state we want to achieve, what's my map for getting there? And so you could do that, I could do that, you could, everybody could do that. And you try to figure out where those points of intersection are and making sure that we're sort of aligned in how we're all working in parallel cohesively towards that end state. That's just where I go with this conversation.
You don't have like the 4 M's or the.
No, I've got no.
Let me. I'm going to talk 2 different topics. One is, what was the first thing you do? And then I want to come back to WEF and to have them talk about how they see a series of dialogues. So what is the process? So the first thing, is
Can I
there a
jump
first
in?
thing?
So here's
You
what I
decide.
do when I go back home. A year ago, nobody was talking, well, I shouldn't say this, but very few people were talking about Canada. There was, when we were talking about brain health, and I went to a few different colleagues and said, guys, where's Canada? Like, we need to have a seat at the table. What's going on? Well, this year, we have a seat at the table. We have 2 major international scientific research conferences that are coming to Canada, Toronto. Not that Toronto is the center of the world, but kind of is. We have the G7 that's coming to Canada. And so the very first thing I do when I get back, we are having a meeting, Morris, we are having a meeting next week to bring together the Canadian partners and some global partners to sort of say how, yes, you are, how, and I think we're going to have some folks from the DAC as well. How do we shape this agenda? How do we make sure that we continue to build off of the momentum that we not started here, but we continue to build here? How do we make sure that we don't lose that momentum? And again, partnership and cohesively.
I was ready to jump in. I was being nice.
I started with we need to bring more people into our brain house, into the circle, as investors, as problem solvers, as innovators. And so I think the first thing that we all should be doing is going out and saying, who are all of the people that I know, that we know, that can be part of our boards, part of our meetings, part of our solution set. And so from the Milken perspective, we have a global convening firepower, and we have very consistently brought brain health to that. And I am like, how do we supercharge it? How do we get more of you part of those conversations and bring more funders in? Because I think there's so much energy, there is so much growing excitement from the funder community, and it's on us to make it happen.
I'm going to go to
Lucy.
Claudio's first A, awareness, right? I couldn't agree more that that's like at the very top. We now have a common language, and I think common language really matters, so we're all speaking that same language of how are we defining brain health, right? What are the subcomponents? We have priorities too, right? We've helped, and so I think it's really important that with that, and the business case, because we need people to buy into that why we're doing this. This is not just because it's the nice thing to do. We must do it. There's so much at stake for our communities and our economies. And so with that, those tools in our hands, how do we accelerate that awareness across all stakeholders? Because this is not just for the health system, not just for governments, everyone, the funders, we all have to come together, the employers, so forth.
Lucy, can I just build on that to say another thing that gives me a lot of hope from the conversation I heard here is all the really amazing work, and there's still a lot to be done, but all the really amazing work that's being done in youth mental health. These youths are going to be coming to the workforce soon enough, and it's something that they're going to be demanding from their employers and from their organizations is, okay, listen, like my brain health, my mental health is super important to me, so chop chop. This isn't optional anymore. And so that's the other piece too, right? And
I couldn't agree more. And they're already demanding it. Actually, we ran the survey to understand Gen Zers, what are the benefits that they most value from the workplace. Brain health, mental health support is #1 on the list.
And they're going to be the ones that really help us in terms of brain health, brain capital, and integrating that AI piece, right? And
Delivering the brain economy.
Yep.
That's right.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you, when you say business case, do you mean a case for business sector or a business case that actually has, in the case for governments as part of the business case, and the case for health system? Who is the case for?
Who's the case for? It's an investment case, because indeed this is a case that you can make to the governments, to the policymakers, to the employers, right, to the health systems, because it's telling you how much value is at stake, both in terms of like the economic productivity of your society, right, if you're a government, right, we now have the tool to translate that into what does it mean for an individual company, right? Like how much are you likely to miss out on in terms of both from a cost perspective, from a top line perspective. Claudio, do you want to?
I wanted just to make a comment.
Yeah.
What we could do and what we are already doing is actually going into company and also promote initiatives that are good for brain health and prevention of brain disorders. In Switzerland, we have a new campaign which is called Migrant-Friendly Workspace. So we actually promote awareness and some inputs to companies to prevent migraine and headache attacks at work. Now, believe it or not, in Switzerland, headaches are the #1 burden of brain disorder at all, because they are so frequent. They're not causing frequently mortality, but they cause disability, particularly in young women. By the way, headache starts already before the age of 10 or between 10. So having an impact on your own company will convince people that, yeah, brain health counts. And by the way, if you avoid absenteeism, and so on and so forth, the productivity of these companies. So this is another way, to walk the talk. So you talk about the overall, but then you intervene in your own company. So in your university, in your company, you say, what could we do to promote?
So George,
That's another way to approach.
if I may add, migraine really makes me think about the need for, in addition to awareness, in addition to action now with the knowledge we have, we still need to be pushing on fundamental research and research that is going to drive change for patients. Because something like migraine or Alzheimer's or any of the severe mental illnesses, we do have interventions that help proportions of those populations or some preventative measures, but we do not have sufficient treatments that are able to help all. And in the absence of that, awareness and driving actually has the potential to drive people away or become frustrated if we're not following that with really intense investment in research and an improvement in the toolbox to measure and understand and actually intervene and treat when necessary. I think prevention is important, but let us not forget that we also owe all of society meaningful change and interventions.
I'm going to turn to Andy Moose now from the World Economic Forum. He just had a session down inside the Congress area on this precise topic and has come forward with at least a process that we ought to start thinking about for 2025.
Thank you, George. I think You know, one of the major themes this year for the forum's annual meeting was collaborative innovation. And I think it's important as we think about, well, how is it that, yes, we hear a lot of talk about collaboration, but what does it take to actually do that on a consistent basis? And the currency of collaboration is trust, and it's relationships, and a shared purpose. And so I think what's important is that we do come together physically, virtually, and meet to really strengthen this community, those that are here with the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative and all the different groups under this common umbrella. I mean, we saw what happened with COVID when you really removed a lot of these barriers, accelerated innovation, novel treatments became available. The one thing that wasn't done was bringing everyone from the public along. And so many lives were lost, not because of the science, but because of the communication. And I think it's important with brain health that we make sure that our narratives are a we. I think in part that's due to stigma and concern, well, that's not me, not my child. But I think the reality that all of us do know is that 1 in 3 of us will suffer from a brain health issue individually, and then all of us are touched, you know, in some other way, in a very direct and meaningful way. So I think this is something that is just below the surface societally that we need to tap into, elevate, and really bring forward solutions, funding, and that only happens through deep and committed partnerships. So we look forward to launching this brain health meeting series in 2025 in collaboration with McKinsey Health Institute, in collaboration with the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative, and we would invite all of you to take part in that with us. The purpose of that series is to identify solutions, but more importantly, strengthen the community of actors and groups that will serve as the backbone to really carry this mandate forward. So thank you.
I just want to thank Andy Moose for his leadership at the World Economic Forum on this issue. Change is hard, even for the World Economic Forum, which is the center of change, of course. So he has really brought the organization along and willing to partner, and it's been terrific, Andy, to be your partner. Thank you. I'm going to call on Joachim Reiser, if he might, from the University of Texas Medical System, just because he is going to be, I think, a major player in this partnership that we're trying to build, and also because Texas is potentially going to invest significant amounts of money in this space, and the University of Texas Medical System is one of the largest in the country. So just your perspectives on what's this process, how do we move forward on this movement?
Well, thank you, George, and everybody here. It's been very, very inspiring here this week. I don't think I've walked that much in a long time. Kind of.
Or uphill.
Or uphill. It's a little bit ad hoc that I'm called out here, but I'm glad I have a chance. I'm here to represent universities at large. I think there's definitely a movement going on, not just in Texas. I can speak also for my other colleagues, where academic institutions are rebranding themselves as not just the educational and research institutions, but also as the institutions that bring us together, connect us to the for-profit sectors, connect us with public policy, connect us to politics, really, and also, and I think that's really important, I think you mentioned it, Cara, making sure that we are learning laboratories, that we use our patient collection early to trial and pilot interventions and see how we do with that. And I think in Texas in particular, we have a little grandeur of what we could be, but we certainly have the institutions. We have the largest medical complex in the world, the Texas Medical Center, where 60 institutions sit next to each other. There's a lot of money in Texas, quite frankly, so that's not an issue. We have heard from the Lieutenant Governor a commitment. Obviously, this has to go through Congress, but the commitment is there to put $3 billion for brain health and dementia research forward. And we will only be able to do this together with you. Because when we do this alone, we might actually get some of it, but we won't be successful. So this is, for me, a call to collaboration, a call to really think about, and I heard you, Lucy, talk about some thoughts about McKinsey, for example. Huge partner for us universities. We at UT, we work a lot with McKinsey. Come a step closer. We come a step or 2 steps closer, and if everyone does that, we invest together in a movement that can't be stopped. And I think if we go away with that spirit and go to our computers next week and follow up and really respond to the many calls we are having, we can get to the next level. I'm very optimistic. So that's why I'm hoping this won't be the last time that we are here. We are thinking of more engagement here with Davos, and I really want to see Texas lead that. I think this is ideal for Texas, and we do have a lot of mental health issues in the state, and we have the leadership position, we have the political climate right now, and we have the funds, quite frankly, to be a dominant force, not just for Texas, really for everybody.
Terrific. We're delighted to share your funding.
I forgot a moment that I'm here at an economic forum, right?
Yeah, one
Claudio.
comment. I mean, I wanted to say we can share the finances. The comment is, and this is very important, we talk about prevention of brain disorders. We talk about promotion of brain health. We need, and I second what you said, we need to understand that we need more research to understand the molecular basis, the true target of interventions for treating mental, neurological disorders, but we need to understand also more the determinants of brain health through the interaction with the climate and many other stuff. So we need really research. I'm a dean of a medical faculty in Switzerland, and this is why I would like to second your approach. We need more research, and we need academic to be involved in what we're discussing here today.
Not to focus over index, as they say in the business, on Texas, but Rice is also involved both within Texas, but more broadly about how to think about systems change globally. So I'm just, some comment from you, Paul, introduce yourself, and then tell us what you're thinking about in terms of systems change.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here, and it's been an incredible week. We can't tell you how much of a pleasure it's been. We have been leading quite a few efforts in Texas. I'm the Vice President for Innovation, Chief Innovation Officer at Rice. And Rice is really a very small university in composition, but when we go after a problem, we identify that problem. We want to find partners to really do problem solutions at scale. That's why we came here, and that's why we love working with you, George. I think, and we're happy to share our funds. I think that's also a good thing. So it's always good to get applause for that. But you know, it really is. I think Jochen was saying this. It's not the capital that is missing, right? We actually have enough of the resources. It's the direction, the collaboration, the focused partnerships to get there. I think this incredible gathering has been incredibly fruitful. Next year, I'm pretty confident that our president, my boss, will come down here from Rice. He couldn't make it, but he is very supportive of it, as is our provost. So Reggie DeRoche and Amy Dittmar has supported this effort, and in particular, bringing together the engineering solutions to really get it to scale in terms of both public policy as well as actual technology through capital means. We have the technology to do it, but we still don't have the fundamentals, and I think that's exactly right. In Texas, we like to say we can't hit what we can't see, right? And if you can't see exactly what's in the brain, if you don't really know the finite structure and how it all interconnects, you can't get there. So we believe in actually building those tools and working with clinicians at UTMB and other institutions across the Texas Medical Center. But we want to expand that to a global partnership. That's why we're here. So it's been a real pleasure to do that.
Good. Thank you. I'm going to call on Daniel Kraft. Daniel is from Silicon Valley and has a major investment fund investing in some really novel approaches that are not dependent upon the speed of biology, but more on Moore's law, the speed of Moore's law. And so I just want, in terms of thinking about research, we have to think about how to do and invite research through funding of for-profit vehicles, which can really bring change as well. So Daniel, just a couple thoughts from you.
I guess I come from Silicon Valley, Portola Valley, but I want people to think.
For us, it's all the same.
Both from the investment and the technology side, Moore's Law, things are moving exponentially. We have the amazing art of the possible. We covered in our second session some of these super convergences, whether it's AI or sensors or multi-omics, and I think maybe an opportunity for both the investment side and Brain House and everything we want to come from this is to not have a failure of imagination of where things might be in 1, 2, and 5 years for Davos 2030, and to almost create that sort of mind map of what's already here and where technology is heading, and then we leverage that convergence of new tools and mindsets and academics and funders to solve for those challenges, because it's such a broad space, it's almost overwhelming. From the investment perspective, there's many things, from video games for mental health to augmented and virtual reality to new forms of digital biomarkers for mental health to brain health. And so I would just challenge this community to sort of not just imagine the art of the future, but how do we build a sort of collaboratorium and be able to see what's already here and how we connect those dots to everything from prevention, diagnostics, therapy, brain and health span together. I think that's where the synthesis is, and I think what can follow from the conversations here in Davos is to make that future by bringing other folks from outside the traditional sphere of neuroscience and mental health to solve for these huge challenges. So it's an exciting time.
As I understand it, aging is simply an engineering problem now, right? So we're going to eliminate the problem of aging coming out of Portola Valley.
Well, I mean, I think health span, everyone's longevity has a lot of snake oil embedded in it. What I try and do, I run a program called Next Med Health, which you're all invited to, is to bring folks from all sorts of different spectrums to not overhype the longevity side, but to cross-fertilize. And I think instead of thinking about sick care, as we usually do, think about that proactive healthcare. I'm also a pediatrician, and how we start early with brain health and bring new mindsets. And you get what you measure. And I think the problem in healthcare and mental health, and I'm an oncologist, what you measure is old school. We need new measures and new mindsets at the super convergence, and that's what's exciting about brain health and human health.
Terrific.
Can I jump in here? Jump
Absolutely.
Quickly?
Jump.
We've talked about universities, we've talked about companies, we've talked about employers. I mean, the piece there are many pieces missing, but one of the important pieces I want to highlight are the people themselves. You are in charge of your brain health. What are the things that you care the most about? Because, I'm pointing at you, Daniel. I know it's not you, but, I could be a startup company that's developing a solution looking for a problem. And so if we're not focusing on the people themselves and what they care about, then we're never gonna make leaps and bounds in terms of brain health.
I think that's a really great point. And we have to think about all people and not just U.S. people, right?
Yes.
So I do think that trying to get more accessible, less expensive modes of interventions can be critical. But I think technology can think about that problem too.
100%, 100%.
It's
And
called
it
the
gives you
market
that
for them.
more continuous measure, right, of what brain health looks like, as opposed to more of those intermittent assessments that traditionally are done in the healthcare setting.
I want to bring in a key thought partner of the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative, and that's Harris Ayer, whose affiliations are global, connections are global, and whose mind is, what was your words? Transcendent? No, something.
Exponential?
Exponential, that's it. An exponential mind. So Harris, just some comments.
Can everyone hear? Yeah, okay. I'm just George's wingman here, and it's been a wonderful week to be George's wingman. I'm trying to keep up. But this is super inspiring. Thank you all for being here. I run the neuropolicy program at Rice University, so that's my sort of formal position, but I work a lot with also McKinsey Health Institute as well. In addition to the points made about research, I wanted to say that I think capital is important. And so in the spirit of collaboration, we are running a project with the European Investment Bank Institute, which is, EIB is the largest public bank in the world. And we're running a special foresight strategy project on investing in the brain transition in Europe. So this involves many interesting stakeholders, private banks, McKinsey, public policy, pharmaceutical companies. At least a quarter of you in the room will be with us in Luxembourg at bank headquarters in February 10th. So this is this idea that how do we channel money from sovereign wealth funds, public pension funds, and then private banking and financial institutions into the brain economy, into the brain transition. And this goes beyond talking about drugs and diagnostics and digital. The things that Daniel mentioned are critical, but this is also about building a neuroscience-inspired civilization. Buildings, commercial, residential. We work a lot with architecture and design, and we were lucky to have JLL, a big real estate company here that has a special interest in neuroscience and designing cityscapes that are neuroscience-inspired. So we're really trying to rally private capital into this area. Can we make a BlackRock for the brain that they run $4 trillion? Can we do that privately, but also on the public side as well? We'll be working, George, on G7 and G20 together, which we're making good progress on the finance ministers meeting. And then finally, we need a workforce around this brain transition. So I wanted to mention that we are running the world's first brain transition executive education course through Rice Global in Paris, April 7th to 10th. George, your organizations will be represented through Kelly, and you'll be there in spirit. You can actually join if you want. But if anyone's interested, we only have 25 slots, and they're filling up fast. So, this is all about how do we really build this movement, connecting the research and the capital and the private companies and public policy all together is essential to bring those things. So thank you all. Thanks, George.
I think one of the great challenges, this man's mind is exponential, that we need to do is to make sure all of these are connected and aligned, even as the individual energy is out there. And so many people are going to be doing many things in this space, and we don't have to manage it. We just have to connect it to a series of processes and goals and potential measures. So.
I say, Lucy, we're very grateful to the McKinsey Health Institute for helping us to do air traffic control. We're going to embark upon strategic planning with Erica and Connor and with your support at a senior level. So you guys are essential to helping us to figure out what is the sort of grand strategy. Is it one entity? How do we coordinate this? We're at the foothills of a global economic transformation, and you guys are right there with us.
Well, I think like everyone in this room, we're all in, right? It's so clear that we need that collaboration, and it's our privilege to be right here with all of you.
So I want to thank these panelists. You guys are all terrific, and you're actors in this space, and you're our brains, and so are you, so are you, so are you. But everyone in this room, somehow we need to continue this momentum, figure out how it is that we can move in a parallel, common sort of idea of how we identify our goals and the systems change we want. How do we measure a degree of progress without trying to control anybody? Because the energy will come from everyone participating in their own way, with their own voice and their own sense. But let's get us aligned. And so the series that you're going to do, we're going to do together. It's one of those things. Harris will do his, but it'll all be connected in some fashion so that we can come together and report, because we can't constrain the energy. We need to excite it and align it. So I want to thank everyone who's been at the Brain House this week. Not all of you have been here all week. Some of you have been here most of our sessions. It's been an extraordinary week for brain health, an extraordinary week for the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative, as we learned from Alzheimer's that, in fact, your brain from babies on are risk factors for dementia. So we have extended our own vision as a result of learning through collaboration. But thank you all. I look forward to working with all of you. Take care.